Hello, everybody. This is the first lecture in a series of lectures that we are going to have on Soyfeed, our Discord server. If you want to participate in those lectures live, the link is going to be in the description. You're welcome to join, participate in lectures, participate in debates, and other awesome stuff. Today, we meet Patrick, Foolproof Mastery, who's going to tell us about logical fallacies, which are part of critical thinking. Hello, Pat.
Hello, thanks for inviting me. This lecture is on logical fallacies, and when someone falls for logical fallacies, it prevents them from seeing whether the conclusion logically follows from the premises or whether one or more premises are false in the argument. Why does critical thinking and being aware of logical fallacies matter? It helps you detect manipulation in debates, media, or advertising. It helps you think more clearly. It helps you build sound arguments. Soundness refers to arguments which are good in form and also all the premises are true. We'll go into a little bit more detail regarding sound arguments later on in the presentation. The main learning objectives for all of you today is to understand what an argument is, understand the concept of a valid argument and how it differs from a sound argument, and then distinguish between formal and informal logical fallacies. Those are two different categories of logical fallacy. Have you got any idea what an argument is?
Yeah, I have some. An argument has at least one premise and one conclusion.
Yeah, one or more premises and a conclusion. Premises and conclusions, they're propositions. They can either be true or false. And then you can test the truthfulness through different methods. It could be evidence, science. And what are not propositions? If someone asks a question such as, how old are you? That's not a proposition. It's got no truth value. Recently, Joe, who's in the chat here, he asked a question to a viral influencer and he responded saying that's a very dumb argument, your question, but questions, they don't have truth value and they're not arguments as well.
Questions don't have truth value because they're not making any claims, right?
Correct, yeah. Okay. So it's just asking your response. Those are a few other examples of things which are not propositions. Definitions you can set based on your own semantics, and then exclamations, ouch, if you touch something hot, that's not a proposition. Below there, we've got an example of an argument. What we've got here in symbols is the argument converted into logical form. The P and the Q, they represent propositions, and then this is an example of an argument. Logical fallacies. Any idea what a logical fallacy is?
Yeah, something that creates a contradiction between two parts of the argument, something like that.
Someone's logical fallacy could result in a contradiction. Logical fallacy is an error in reasoning. It's like a flaw in the structure of an argument, and it could be in the truth value of the premises of the argument. An argument could have a good structure, but one or more of the premises could be false, and that would be a logical fallacy in the argument. And we'll have a look at what a good structure means going forward. Some examples of logical fallacies are personal incredulity, appeal to legality, appeals to nature. I'm guessing most people here have came across at least one of these logical fallacies. The first one, personal incredulity. Have you got any idea what that means?
Yeah, personal incredulity is when you making a claim, something like, oh, I can't imagine something to be true, therefore it's false.
Correct, yeah, that's exactly how it works. When someone just assumes because something seems ridiculous that it can't be true, the rough form of that argument, if you're going to write it as a valid argument, would be something like P1. If something seems completely ridiculous to be true, then it's not true. Premise 2, something seems completely ridiculous, and then the conclusion, then this thing must not be true. That's a good form of the argument, but the first premise is false. Just because something seems ridiculous to you does not mean that it's not necessarily true. And then the other two, legality, is when someone thinks that something is good or moral just because it's legal. The appeal to nature, when someone assumes something is healthy, good, or desirable just because it's natural. Some questions, can you think of something in nature that is not healthy to eat? Can you think of something that used to be legal or is legal that is bad?
Oh, I
just
can think of
some
a few
self-reflection there. Yeah, do you want to pull them out?
for the second one, it's something I use often, which is 200 years ago, we still owned black people. That was totally legal.
Yeah, that's a good example there. There's still human slavery in certain parts around the world. Poisonous mushrooms is one thing which can be natural and is not healthy for humans. But with a basic understanding of logic, you don't need to learn the names of fallacies. Very often people say things like, oh, that's an appeal to nature, that's an appeal to legality. If logic, you can just point out what's wrong in the argument without having to actually know the name of the fallacy. We have to first know what a valid argument is and a sound argument and how they differ from each other. A valid argument is if all the premises are true, then the conclusion cannot be false. Here we've got an example of a valid argument. If the moon is made of cheese, then astronauts can eat it. Premise 2, the moon is made of cheese. Conclusion, therefore astronauts can eat it. This is quite a common form of an argument. Structure through the rule of inference is known as modus ponens. It's a valid argument, but all the premises aren't true.
By valid, do you mean that the conclusion must necessarily come out of the premises or the premise?
Valid means that if all the premises are true, then the conclusion logically follows from the premises.
Okay.
Premise 1 is true or false?
Premise 1 is true, but premise 2 is false.
Correct, yeah. Invalid argument. The argument is invalid when the conclusion does not logically follow from the premises, even if the premises happen to be true. Very often online, you see people just make random claims. Here's an example of an invalid argument where it's just P1, there are cave paintings of humans hunting. Premise 2, humans have canines. Conclusion, farming animals is moral. In this argument, premise 1 and premise 2 are true. There are cave paintings of humans hunting. Humans do have canines as a species, but the conclusion is not related to the first two premises. The first two are true, the conclusion does not logically follow. You can just then say, okay, that argument is invalid. In this lecture today, we won't actually go into rules of inference, how to derive the conclusion from the premises. Some people can have a very good intuition and just see that the conclusion does not logically follow from the premises because they're just three unrelated propositions. Sound argument is an argument which is valid and also has all true premises. It's got a good structure where the conclusion flows from the premises if the premises are true and all the premises are true. The truthfulness of the premises can be evaluated based on evidence, science. Here we've got an example of a sound argument where the argument is valid and all the premises are true. And then again here in brackets I've just shown the argument in logical form. If you want to learn a little bit more about how to write out propositions in terms of symbols, there's quite a long course on my YouTube channel with Aputa, great teacher Aputa, who teaches all of this. Now we're going to go into the two different categories of fallacy. Formal fallacy is when an argument is invalid by form. Do you remember what an invalid argument is?
Yeah, the conclusion doesn't follow from the premises. That's an invalid argument.
Correct, yeah. That would be a type of formal fallacy.
Just for language people, just because I'm not an English speaker and it took me a really long time to understand. By formal fallacy, you mean that it's a fallacy that follows from the form of the argument, correct?
It's a flaw in the form of the argument, by form, structure of the argument. Does that make sense?
Sure, because just
okay?
the word formal means a bunch of stuff. Just want to make sure.
Yeah, formal, it comes from the word form for structure. It's a fallacy in the structure of the argument. In the recent reel I made, there was someone saying humans are omnivores. If he's going to conclude from that farming animals is moral, that would be a formal fallacy. Informal fallacy now is not to do with the structure of the argument, but one or more premises are false. In this case, we've got something known as the appeal to nature fallacy, which we've covered, and most of you, I'm sure, know. Premise 1, if poisonous mushrooms are natural, then poisonous mushrooms are healthy. Premise 2, poisonous mushrooms are natural. Conclusion, therefore, poisonous mushrooms are healthy. One or more premises are false in this example. I should have probably hidden this to give you a chance to have a think for yourself, but the first premise is false. And premise 2 can be true. It's an appeal to nature. Just because something is natural does not mean it's healthy. Makes sense?
Yep.
Some examples here. Eating steak is natural. That's being represented by the variable P. Conclusion, eating steak is justified. That's being represented by the variable Q. What fallacies do we have here? I'm going to let you all have a look there for a few seconds. Have a think. We've covered the two categories, formal and informal fallacies. Does the conclusion follow from the first premise? It does not follow based on the rules of logic, which we won't cover in this session. If you want to learn more about it, there's a good textbook by Russell Marcus, Philosophical Applications. We've got a formal fallacy there. And then I would also argue that eating steak is not natural in most cases, because humans created through selective breeding the cows that are violated in the industry right now. And then even if humans were to hunt cows using guns, that would still not be natural. Do you agree?
Yeah, it's impressive to put two fallacies into two sentences.
In most cases, I would say eating steak is not natural as well. I'm curious what you think. Would you agree with that?
Okay, steak is a modern invention, right? And it's an invention and the production of a humanity, of a human being, right? Of a human kind, and not to talk too religiously. The definition of natural is whatever is not made by a human or was not touched by a human. We can argue that nothing is natural on Earth anymore, except for maybe like the Antarctic Ocean, the depths of Antarctic Ocean. But the production of steak definitely isn't natural.
Yeah. And what about if hypothetically a human was eating a natural piece of flesh? Would you say that's natural because the humans involved there? Sort of the way that I understand that natural is like free from humans.
Yeah, that's how I understand natural to mean as well. But you can make the claim that before the Homo genus and before, I don't know, like the tools that the Homo genus made and the fire and all of that stuff, it could be like that somebody was just like dropping on the floor, just like straight up eating a mouse. And I would call that, I don't know, eating meat. And that would be maybe natural, right? Before the tools, before the genus Homo was ever, something like that.
Yeah, it's a good point there. Some tips as we move towards the end. If someone makes a random statement, such as this person has a degree, their claim must be true, I'd ask someone to provide their argument in the form of a syllogism. A syllogism is two premises and a conclusion. And then I would rewrite someone's statement into a valid argument if necessary. And then after rewriting the argument, I'll say, is this what you mean? Is this your argument? And then I'll check the truth value of the premises. For example, with that example there, this person has a degree, their claim must be true. I would write it out like this. If they are not able to provide a syllogism, you might feel interested to write out the argument and see if they'll agree that that is their argument. In this case, P1, if a person has a degree, then their claim must be true. Premise 2, a person has a degree. Conclusion, this person's claim must be true. Then I'll check through the truth value of the premises, and then I'll just deny the first premise. Just the fact that a person has a degree, I don't think that their claim is automatically true. And then I'll present a contradiction. For example, in the video I made, I heard Jordan Peterson saying, we don't know where the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere comes from. Jordan Peterson, he's got a degree, but he's saying a false claim there. That's creating a contradiction in that a person's claim must be true if they've got a degree. If they don't want to correct their contradiction and adjust their argument, then I'll just end the conversation. I'll just assume that they're just either time wasting or not understanding what's going on. Any questions there?
Yeah, just to make sure that I understand, the argument that you presented here is valid, but it's not sound, correct?
Yeah, correct. Like I would not say that P1 is true. Just because if a person has a degree, then their claim must be true. That's what I would assume that person thinks from their statement that they made above in speech marks. Potentially, when you ask them to provide a syllogism, they'll provide you something. Maybe they'll just go on a rant and not be able to do that. If you're interested, try and write out their statement into an argument to see if they'll sign off on it. Or maybe they'll propose some adjustments to the argument themselves just to get closer to what they mean.
Heard and understood.
Contradictions, we won't go into how contradictions are represented in logical form today, or how principle of explosion, which when someone makes a contradiction is the strongest form of victory in a debate, because from a contradiction any statement can be derived. If you're someone who, is able at one point, will be able to write out arguments in logical form and do rules of inference and rules of equivalence, which is how you see whether the conclusion logically follows through the truth, which is flowing through each premise to the end. You'll be able to see that from that contradiction derived, you can then create any statement.
Explain that a little more, Patrick, because I'm not sure I understand. What do you mean from a contradiction any statement can be derived? What are you saying here?
I won't go into formal logic today, but effectively what you get is a P and a not a P in the argument. And then from that, there's a conjunction. You can then use rules of logic to create any new proposition. It's a bit hard to just say it through natural language. I'm not sure if I had the slide there. You can derive from that contradiction, like the moon is made of cheese, or you can just derive any sort of proposition. As some people say, they're effectively a gibberish generator if they're just okay with being okay with a contradiction and they don't want to adjust their argument. I did a debate with a hunter who was like, yeah, I've contradicted myself. There's not much more you can do, because through the principle of explosion, they've just got no structure to their thoughts. They're okay with a P and a not P, where then you can just adjust that statement and get another statement through the conjunction of the contradiction. I've got true and a false here. Valid arguments can be unsound.
True.
True, yeah. An argument can have a good structure, but one or more premises can be false. Sound arguments can be invalid. True or false?
No, that's not true. Sound argument also must be valid.
Correct. A sound argument is by default valid because it's both valid and all the premises are true. Conclusion logically follows from the premises. An argument can consist of a single premise. Can an argument do that?
No, that's not true. You can have one premise and one conclusion. Is that what you mean?
Correct. If someone says, for example, humans are omnivores, potentially they're trying to deliver an argument. One argument could be premise one, humans are omnivores, conclusion, humans are omnivores. The conclusion can be same as the first premise. That would be an argument. If someone's just saying one claim, I would just ask, are you presenting an argument? Just to be clear.
Awesome.
What we did not cover today, we did not cover derivations. I tried to keep all the arguments in the same form of modus ponens for an implication, an if-then statement. But then there's all sorts of other different rules of inference, such as modus tollens, disjunctive syllogism, hypothetical syllogism. And then I encourage you to have a go at formal logic. Here he's comparing black seed honey versus ibuprofen. As you're listening, just try and see if he delivers an argument, if he's presenting an argument as to why the black seed honey is better than the ibuprofen. How many claims does he make?
Ibuprofen or black seed honey, which one should you take when you're feeling sick? Well, this one's made in a lab. This one is made by nature.
He's made a couple of claims. This one's made in the lab. This one is made by nature. Potentially, he's trying to imply that the natural version is better. He didn't explicitly say that natural is better.
The conclusion of his video presumably is going to be, well, just buy black seed honey then. And that would be the conclusion of the argument of all of his claims.
Yeah, if I got a chance to speak with him, I'll just ask something like, are you concluding that this is healthy? Is that your final conclusion? Just to be sure. But yeah, just through his language, that's what I'm assuming as well. He also didn't present an argument that the black seed honey is natural, made by nature. We don't know the process that black seed honey went through. I saw he was adding things himself to the honey that's not natural then.
Also doesn't actually solve the problem. It just puts a plaster on the wound. You just don't feel the problem anymore. Whereas this one is anti-inflammatory, antibacterial, antimicrobial, antifungal. A lot of
So, yeah, he
Isn't
went on.
ibuprofen like actually anti-inflammatory?
Yeah, he also made the claim antifungal, was it bacterial? Something could have all those properties and still be unhealthy, right? Does bleach have all those properties?
It could also be that black seed honey does have all of these properties, but in such a minute amounts that taking just one good anti-inflammatory that reduces your inflammation a lot is better than taking black seed honey, that has all of those properties, but it's going to help just a little bit.
Yeah, that's also another potential hypothesis. It's also good to just present an alternative idea and see why his hypothesis is more expected than your one. He also talks about the root cause, go into some semantics. What do you mean by root cause? What's the argument that it treats the root cause? Why is it bad to put a plaster or whatever?
It helps tackle the root problem. So me, definitely, I would go with black seed raw honey. If you get your hands on it, there's a link just over there. Click it.
Yeah, there you go. So
Yeah,
that's
so
the
then-
conclusion. I would definitely go with this shit because it's better somehow.
There's a load of claims there. And then if I had the chance to speak with him, I would just say, are you concluding, that from all those claims, that one is healthier? And then you just try and formulate some sort of argument or ask him to provide the argument. It's just a load of claims there, just trying to sort of get the emotion, I would say, of the person watching the video to find it convincing. Would you agree?
Yeah, yeah. Well, here's the thing.
So making
Most
just a load of-
people don't have the ability to cut through the bullshit, right?
So just a load of claims, quite confident speaking, which some people could find convincing.
If anybody has questions to Patrick, either raise your hand and I'll bring you on stage or put something in the chat.
Shadow Starshine said, my disagreement with this is the asking for an argument. If you're good with logic and translation, you can generally take basic English and turn it into one yourself. You can, but sometimes your assumptions can be wrong. We had the example with the degree claim where I first said you can ask them to provide it as a syllogism, but you could also try and turn that into an argument yourself and say, is that what you mean? And then they can offer corrections if that's not what they mean. Shadow Starshine is bringing a good point that most people don't have the formal skills. It could be better to just present an argument directly and say, is that what you mean?
I think it was part of your presentation today as well, right? That you say that you want to be charitable and maybe try to steelman somebody with an actual structural argument. Yeah. Felix is asking actual question. How do you handle people who say, well, something is bad is subjective to you during a debate?
Basically, like morality is subjective, right? I would maybe then present an argument, something like any action is permissible since morality is subjective, using like a universal quantifier over all actions. That any action is permissible since morality is subjective. Murder is an action and then therefore it's permissible since morality is subjective. I'll just try to see whether they truly believe any action is permissible since morality is subjective.
Felix is asking, do you know about the fallacy?
I've not heard about that one.
The fallacy is the logical error of assuming that an argument's conclusion is false simply because the argument itself contains a fallacy.
I've not came across that one, but yeah, I agree that just because an argument could have a formal fallacy, have an informal fallacy, the conclusion could still be correct. Like, they just have not provided a sound argument for that conclusion.
I think looking inward into my community, some people can have the right conclusion, veganism, but have terrible arguments for it. Or terrible premises for it. Using fallacies, right? All of that stuff.
Yeah. Not a valid argument. Yeah, they could provide correct premises, but the conclusion doesn't flow from the premises.
Patrick, thank you very much for coming. Just to reiterate to everybody who's watching on YouTube, if you want to be part of those lectures, please join Soyfeed, the Discord server. The link is going to be in the description, correct, Patrick? Yes.
Yeah.
And yeah, thank you everybody for coming, and we'll see you next time.